Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and seen a lie so fragile that you were afraid to breathe on it? Have you ever watched someone smile while every instinct in your body screamed that something was terribly wrong? There are moments in life when the universe puts two people in the same room and everything changes. Not because of fate or destiny or any romantic notion, but because one person decides to see what everyone else has chosen to ignore. Zara Thompson was 27 years old, and she had become an expert at lying with her eyes. She stood in front of the bathroom mirror at Bellissimo, the upscale Italian restaurant where she had worked as a hostess for the past 2 years, carefully applying concealer to the purple bruise blooming beneath her left eye. The makeup was expensive, the kind specifically designed to cover imperfections, and she had become skilled at using it. Layer after layer, blend after blend, until the evidence of last night disappeared beneath a flawless mask. Her hands were steady. They had to be. The swelling was harder to hide. Her eye was still puffy, the lid slightly drooped from the impact of Marcus's fist. She had spent 20 minutes this morning with ice packs and cold spoons, trying to reduce the inflammation, but there was only so much she could do. The rest would require acting. Allergies, she told herself, practicing the word in the mirror. Seasonal allergies. They came on suddenly last night. My eyes always swell like this in the spring. It was December. She would have to adjust the lie. New cleaning products, she decided instead. The building changed cleaning products and I had a reaction. It happens sometimes. Better. More believable. Less tied to a specific season that anyone could easily disprove. Zara finished her makeup and stepped back to examine her work. In the harsh fluorescent light of the restaurant bathroom, she looked almost normal. A little tired, maybe. A little swollen around the eyes. But nothing that screamed violence, nothing that whispered abuse, nothing that told the truth about what her life had become. She adjusted the collar of her black dress, making sure it covered the finger-shaped bruises on her neck from 2 weeks ago. Those were finally fading, turning from purple to yellow-green, and soon they would be gone entirely. Until the next time. There was always a next time. Zara had been with Marcus Patterson for 14 months, and she had learned many things in that time. She had learned that charm could hide cruelty. She had learned that apologies could become weapons. She had learned that the words "I love you" could be followed by a fist, and that somehow, impossibly, both could be real at the same time. She had learned that escaping was not as simple as walking out the door. Marcus was a financial analyst at a prestigious firm in Manhattan. He was handsome and well-spoken and came from a good family. He had an apartment in the Upper West Side and a membership at an exclusive gym and friends who thought he was wonderful. No one who knew Marcus Patterson would ever believe he was capable of violence. That was what made him so dangerous. The first time he hit her had been 8 months ago, after a dinner party where she had laughed too long at another man's joke. He had apologized immediately, had cried, had sworn it would never happen again. And Zara, who had grown up watching her mother accept the same promises from her father, had believed him because she wanted to believe him, because the alternative was admitting she had made a terrible mistake. The second time had been easier for him, and the third, and the fourth. Now, 14 months into their relationship, Zara had stopped counting. She had stopped hoping. She had stopped believing that this was anything other than what it was, a trap she had walked into willingly and could not find her way out of. Marcus controlled her phone. He tracked her location. He monitored her bank account and her credit cards and her email. He had isolated her from friends who might have noticed the bruises, had convinced her family that she was too busy to visit, had systematically dismantled every support system she might have used to escape. He had told her in explicit detail what would happen if she tried to leave, so Zara stayed. She went to work and smiled at customers and pretended everything was fine. She went home and walked on eggshells and tried not to set him off. She lived in a constant state of fear and hypervigilance, never knowing when the next blow would come, only certain that it would. This was her life now. This was all her life would ever be, unless she did something to change it. But she was too tired for that, too beaten down in every sense of the word. Some nights when Marcus was sleeping and she was lying awake with a new bruise throbbing somewhere on her body, she thought about ending things. Not the relationship, but everything. Just going to sleep and never waking up. It would be easier than this endless cycle of violence and apology, of hope and despair, of love that felt like hatred and hatred that masqueraded as love. She never acted on those thoughts. She was not quite ready to give up, not quite willing to let Marcus win so completely, but they were there, lurking at the edges of her consciousness, waiting for the night when her resistance finally broke. Tonight, though, she just had to get through her shift. 8 hours of smiling and seating customers and pretending her face did not hurt, and then she could go home and face whatever mood Marcus was in. One foot in front of the other, 1 hour at a time. Zara took a deep breath, forced a smile onto her face, and walked out of the bathroom to begin her evening. Bellissimo was busy for a Tuesday night. The restaurant occupied the ground floor of a historic building in Little Italy, all exposed brick and warm lighting and the smell of garlic and fresh bread. It had been a neighborhood institution for 3 generations, passed down through the Valenti family, and it attracted a clientele that ranged from tourists seeking authentic Italian cuisine to locals who had been eating there since childhood. Zara loved this place, or had loved it, before Marcus had drained the capacity for love out of her. She loved the way the candlelight flickered on the white tablecloths, the sound of Italian being spoken in the kitchen, the satisfied sighs of customers tasting their first bite of homemade pasta. For 8 hours a day, she could pretend she was part of something beautiful, something warm and welcoming and good, and then she went home. The evening started normally enough. She greeted guests at the door, checked reservations, led people to their tables with practiced grace. Her coworkers nodded hello and did not comment on her swollen eyes, either because they believed her lie about allergies or because they had learned not to ask questions. Probably the latter. Zara had noticed the way people looked at her sometimes, the quick glances that said they saw more than she wanted them to see, but no one ever asked, no one ever pushed. It was easier to accept the lie than to confront the truth, easier to look away than to get involved. She understood. She did not blame them. The dinner rush was in full swing when the front door opened and a group of men walked in. Zara looked up from her podium ready to smile and ask if they had a reservation, and felt the words die in her throat. There were 4 of them, all dressed in expensive suits that spoke of money and power and danger. 3 of them were clearly bodyguards, big men with watchful eyes who scanned the restaurant like they were looking for threats. But it was the 4th man who commanded attention, who drew the eye and held it, who made everyone in the restaurant suddenly aware that someone important had arrived. He was tall, over 6 feet, with dark hair swept back from a face that was almost impossibly handsome in a severe classical way. High cheekbones, a strong jaw, a nose that had been broken at some point and healed slightly crooked, giving character to what might otherwise have been 2 perfect features. But it was his eyes that held her, dark as espresso and just as intense, taking in the room with the calm assessment of a predator surveying his territory. Dante Valenti. Zara had heard stories about the Valenti family, whispered conversations in the kitchen that stopped when she walked in, knowing looks exchanged between servers who had worked here longer than she had. She knew the restaurant had belonged to the Valenti family for generations. She knew there were rumors about what else the family was involved in, businesses that had nothing to do with pasta and everything to do with power. She had never met Dante Valenti himself. The owner rarely came to the restaurant, preferring to let his managers handle the day-to-day operations. But she had seen his picture in newspapers and magazines, always accompanying articles about philanthropy or real estate development, never mentioning the other whispers that followed his name like shadows. Now he was standing in front of her, and she needed to speak. "Good evening," she managed, her voice only slightly unsteady. "Welcome to Bellissimo. Do you have a reservation?" Dante Valenti looked at her. It was not a casual glance, not the distracted acknowledgement of someone waiting to be seated. He looked at her like he was reading every thought in her head, like he could see past the makeup and the practiced smile to the broken woman underneath. His dark eyes narrowed slightly. "I own this restaurant," he said, his voice deep and accented in a way that made her think of Rome, of old money, of danger wrapped in silk. "I do not need a reservation." "Of course. I apologize, Mr. Valenti." Zara felt heat rise to her cheeks, embarrassment mixing with the constant undercurrent of fear that had become her default state. "If you will follow me, I can show you to your usual table." In a moment, he did not move. His bodyguards stood silently behind him, their presence filling the entryway, but Dante's attention was entirely on her face, on her eyes. "What is your name?" The question startled her. In 2 years of working here, no owner or manager had ever asked her name. "Zara," she said. "Zara Thompson." "Zara." He said it slowly, as if testing how it felt on his tongue. "And how long have you worked for my family, Zara Thompson?" 2 years, sir." "Almost exactly." 2 years," he repeated, "and you are crying?" "What?" "No. No, I am not crying." Zara touched her face instinctively, horrified. These are just allergies, new cleaning products in the building. My eyes always react this way. Dante Valenti did not blink, did not smile, did not look away. Those are not allergies, he said quietly. His voice was low enough that only she could hear, but it carried the weight of absolute certainty. Do not insult my intelligence by lying to me again. Zara's blood turned to ice. For a long moment she could not speak, could not move, could not do anything but stand there, trapped in the gaze of a man who had just seen through every defense she had spent months constructing. She felt exposed, naked, like he had stripped away all her careful makeup and her practiced lies, and was looking directly at the truth of what her life had become. I do not know what you mean, she whispered, but the words sounded weak even to her own ears. Dante continued to study her face with that unnerving intensity. Then he nodded once, a small movement that seemed to communicate something she did not understand. I will take my usual table, he said. You will bring me an espresso, and then you will sit with me and tell me who did this to you. Mr. Valenti, I cannot just leave my post to sit with a customer. I will be in trouble with my manager. Something flickered in his dark eyes. Amusement, maybe, or something colder. I own this restaurant, he reminded her. I own every table and every chair and every plate and every piece of silverware. I own the building this restaurant sits in. I own the 3 buildings on either side of it. I own the manager who thinks he can tell you what to do. If I say you sit with me, you sit with me. His voice hardened slightly. Unless you have somewhere else you need to be tonight. The question hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning. Somewhere else to be. Someone else waiting for her. Someone who would hurt her if she did not come home on time, if she did not have a good explanation for where she had been and who she had been talking to. Zara opened her mouth to refuse, to make an excuse, to retreat behind the walls she had built so carefully, but something stopped her. Maybe it was exhaustion, the bone-deep weariness that came from months of fear and violence. Maybe it was desperation, the tiny spark of hope that someone had finally seen the truth. Maybe it was simply that she was tired, so incredibly tired, of pretending to be okay when everything was falling apart. 1 espresso, she heard herself say, and then I have to get back to work. Dante Valenti smiled. It was not a warm smile, not a comforting smile. It was the smile of a man who had just gotten exactly what he wanted, who was used to getting exactly what he wanted, who would accept nothing less than exactly what he wanted. 1 espresso, he agreed. For now. He walked past her into the restaurant, his bodyguards falling into step behind him, and Zara stood at her podium with her heart pounding and her carefully constructed world suddenly feeling very, very unstable. She did not know it yet, but her life had just changed forever. The table Dante Valenti considered his usual was in the back corner of the restaurant, positioned so he could see every entrance and exit while remaining partially hidden from casual observation. The bodyguards took positions at nearby tables, close enough to respond to any threat, but far enough to give the illusion of privacy. Zara walked over with his espresso on a small tray, her hands trembling slightly, despite her best efforts to control them. She set the cup down in front of him and started to turn away. Sit. The single word stopped her in her tracks. Mr. Valenti, I really cannot. You can, and you will. Dante gestured to the chair across from him. I will not ask again. There was something in his voice that made it clear refusal was not an option. Not a threat, exactly, but an absolute certainty that he would be obeyed. Zara found herself sinking into the chair before she had consciously decided to do so. Up close, Dante Valenti was even more intimidating. The candlelight cast shadows across his face, emphasizing the sharp planes of his cheekbones and the darkness of his eyes. He wore a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her annual salary, and a watch on his wrist, that she recognized from a magazine advertisement as being worth more than a luxury car. He looked like what he was, a man of immense power and wealth, a man who was used to having the world bend to his will. And right now, his attention was focused entirely on her. How long? He asked. Zara blinked. How long what? How long has he been hitting you? The bluntness of the question stole her breath. She opened her mouth to deny it, to retreat back into the safety of her lies, but the words would not come. Something about the way he was looking at her made dishonesty feel impossible. I do not know what you are talking about, she managed weakly. Yes, you do? Dante lifted his espresso and took a sip, never breaking eye contact. Your left eye is swollen despite the makeup you have used to cover it. You are favoring your right side when you walk, which tells me your ribs are bruised. You flinched when a glass broke in the kitchen earlier, a reaction that has nothing to do with the sound and everything to do with conditioned fear. And when I raised my voice slightly just now, your entire body went rigid in anticipation of a blow. Zara felt tears prick at the corners of her eyes, the ones that were already swollen and aching, the ones she had tried so hard to hide. "You see things," she whispered, "things other people do not notice." "I am paid to notice things." Dante set down his cup. "More importantly, I choose to notice things. Most people see what they want to see, what is comfortable to see. I have never had the luxury of comfort." He leaned forward slightly. "Who is he?" "I cannot tell you that." "Cannot or will not?" "Both." Zara blinked rapidly, trying to keep the tears from falling. "You do not understand. He will kill me if he finds out I talked to someone. He has connections, resources. He tracks my phone, my location. He probably already knows I am not at my post right now, and I will have to explain when I get home, and if I cannot explain to his satisfaction." She trailed off, unable to finish the sentence. Dante was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was different. Softer, but somehow more dangerous. "What is his name? Why does it matter?" Zara wiped at her eyes, smearing her carefully applied makeup. "What are you going to do? Send your men to threaten him? He is not the kind of person who can be intimidated. He is smart and connected, and he has powerful friends. And you think I do not?" The question hung in the air between them. Zara looked at Dante Valenti, really looked at him, and saw something she had not allowed herself to see before. The cold calculation in his eyes, the controlled power in his posture, the way his bodyguards watched him with a mixture of respect and fear. She knew the rumors about the Valenti family. Everyone who worked at Bellissimo knew the rumors, but knowing something intellectually was different from feeling it, from sitting across from a man who radiated danger like heat from a fire. "You are Mafia," she said quietly. It was not a question. "I am a businessman." The corner of Dante's mouth twitched slightly. "My business simply extends into areas that most businessmen prefer to avoid. And you are offering to help me? A stranger you have never met before tonight? I am offering to hear your story. Whether I help depends on what you tell me." Dante lifted his espresso again. "But I will tell you this, Zara Thompson. I have built my entire life on being able to read people, on knowing when they are lying, when they are afraid, when they are hiding something. And everything about you tells me that you are a woman in genuine danger who has run out of options and out of hope." He paused, his dark eyes holding hers. "I do not like seeing capable people broken by cowards who use violence to feel powerful. It offends something fundamental in me. So talk to me. Tell me who he is and what he has done, and then we will see what can be done about it." Zara sat in silence, her mind racing. Every instinct she had developed over the past 14 months told her to refuse, to protect herself, to not trust anyone because trust had only ever led to pain. Marcus had taught her that lesson over and over again, had systematically destroyed her faith in other people, had made her believe that she was alone and would always be alone. But another part of her, a part that she had thought Marcus had killed months ago, was screaming that this was her chance, that a man with Dante Valenti's power and resources could actually help her, that this might be the only opportunity she would ever get to escape. "His name is Marcus Patterson," she heard herself say, and the words felt like breaking through the surface of water after nearly drowning. "He is a financial analyst at Morrison and Associates. We have been together for 14 months. He started hitting me 8 months ago. Once she started talking, she could not stop. The words poured out of her like water from a dam. Everything she had been holding back for months, all the fear and pain and desperation she had buried so deep, she had almost forgotten they were there. She told Dante about meeting Marcus, about the charm and the romance and the way he had made her feel special. She told him about the gradual isolation, the way Marcus had separated her from friends and family until she had no one left to turn to. She told him about the first time he hit her, and the apology that followed, and how she had believed him because she wanted to believe him. She told him about the escalation, each incident worse than the last. The black eyes and split lips and bruised ribs. The nights spent cowering in corners waiting for his rage to burn itself out. The mornings spent covering the evidence, becoming an expert in concealer and lies. She told him about the control Marcus exercised over every aspect of her life. The phone tracking and the financial monitoring and the constant surveillance. The threats about what would happen if she tried to leave. The detailed descriptions of how he would find her, how he would make her pay, how no one would ever believe her because he was so charming, and she was just some nobody waitress who had clearly made the whole thing up for attention. She told him about the nights when she thought about ending it all, just going to sleep and never waking up, because death seemed preferable to another day of living like this. And through it all, Dante Valenti listened. He did not interrupt. He did not offer platitudes or empty reassurances. He did not look away or check his phone or show any sign that he was less than completely focused on every word she said. He simply sat across from her, his dark eyes absorbing her story like a sponge absorbing water, his expression giving nothing away. When she finally ran out of words, when the flood of confession had drained to a trickle and then to silence, Zara felt empty, hollow, like she had poured out everything she had been carrying and now there was nothing left inside her. She also felt something she had not felt in months. Relief. "Where does he work?" Dante asked finally. "Morrison and Associates. They are in a building on Park Avenue." "And where does he live?" "He has an apartment on the Upper West Side. I live there too. With him." Not anymore. The words were quiet but absolute. Zara looked at him, confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean that you are not going back to that apartment. Not tonight, not tomorrow, not ever." Dante pulled out his phone and typed something quickly, then set it aside. "As of this moment, you are under my protection. Your Marcus will discover very soon that the woman he has been hurting is no longer available for him to hurt. You cannot do that. Marcus will come looking for me. He will not just give up. Let him come." For the first time, Dante smiled, and it was the smile of a predator anticipating prey. "I welcome the opportunity to meet the man who thinks it is acceptable to use a woman as a punching bag. We will have a very educational conversation. You do not understand. He is dangerous. So am I." Dante leaned forward, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "The difference between your Marcus and me is that I have spent my entire life being dangerous. I have built an empire on being the most dangerous man in any room I enter. Your boyfriend is a coward who hits women because it makes him feel powerful. I am the reason men like him cannot sleep at night." He reached across the table and took her hand. His touch was gentle, careful, nothing like the violent grips she had become accustomed to. "You have been alone in this for a long time, Zara Thompson. That ends now. I do not know why your story has affected me the way it has, but I have learned to trust my instincts. My instincts tell me that you are worth protecting. So I will protect you, whether you like it or not." Tears were streaming down Zara's face now, the mascara she had applied so carefully, this morning running in black rivers down her cheeks. "Why?" she asked. "Why would you do this for a stranger?" Dante was silent for a long moment. "Because someone should," he said finally. "Because you have clearly been waiting for someone to see what everyone else has chosen to ignore. Because you remind me of my mother, who stayed with my father far longer than she should have, who paid for that loyalty with years of suffering before she found the strength to leave." He paused. "And because I'm not a good man, Zara. I have done things that would horrify you. But even I have limits. Even I have lines I will not cross, and allowing violence against women is one of those lines." He stood, adjusting his jacket with precise movements. "You will come with me tonight. I have a guest apartment in my building that you can use for as long as you need. Tomorrow, we will discuss what happens next, how we ensure your safety permanently, but tonight you will sleep somewhere safe, somewhere your Marcus cannot reach you. I cannot just leave. My shift is not over, and my things are still at his apartment. Your shift is over because I say it is over. I told you, I own this restaurant. As for your things, I will send people to collect them tomorrow. Whatever you need tonight, I will provide." Zara stood on shaky legs, her mind struggling to process everything that was happening. An hour ago, she had been standing at her podium, preparing to spend another evening pretending everything was fine. Now she was being offered an escape she had given up hoping for, by a man she had never met, for reasons she did not fully understand. It seemed too good to be true. In her experience, things that seemed too good to be true usually were. But what was the alternative? Going back to Marcus, pretending she had not just poured out her soul to a stranger, waiting for the next time he lost his temper and used her as an outlet for his rage? "Okay," she said quietly. "Okay, I will come with you." "Good." Dante signaled to his bodyguards, who rose from their tables and moved toward the door. "You have made the right choice, Zara Thompson. I promise you will not regret it." As they walked out of the restaurant, Zara could not shake the feeling that her life had just changed in ways she could not yet comprehend. She was leaving behind everything familiar, everything she had known for the past 14 months, and stepping into the unknown with a man whose reputation suggested he was far more dangerous than the one she was escaping. But for the first time in 8 months, she did not feel afraid. The building where Dante Valenti lived was unlike anything Zara had ever seen. It was a converted warehouse in Tribeca, modernized into luxury apartments while retaining the industrial character of exposed brick and high ceilings. The lobby was staffed around the clock by security personnel, who greeted Dante with respectful nods and carefully avoided looking directly at Zara. "This building is mine," Dante explained as they rode a private elevator to the top floor. "Every unit, every resident has been carefully selected. Security is comprehensive and discreet. Your Marcus will not find you here. How can you be sure? Because I have spent 20 years building systems that keep unwanted people out of my life." The elevator doors opened onto a hallway with only 2 doors. "My apartment is there." He pointed to the door on the left. "The guest apartment is there." He walked to the door on the right and opened it with a code. Inside was a space that made Zara's breath catch in her throat. The apartment was enormous by Manhattan standards, at least 2,000 square feet of open living space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The furniture was modern and expensive, all clean lines and neutral colors, but there were touches of warmth throughout. Fresh flowers on the kitchen counter, soft throws draped over the couch, art on the walls that looked original rather than mass-produced. "This is for guests?" Zara asked incredulously. "Occasional guests. It has not been used in some time." Dante walked through the space, turning on lights and adjusting thermostats. "The kitchen is fully stocked. The bedroom is through there. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you, various sizes that I keep for emergencies." He paused. "Do not ask what kind of emergencies." "I was not going to." "Good." He turned to face her. "I will be next door if you need anything. My security team monitors this building constantly. If anyone attempts to enter who should not be here, they will be dealt with. You are safe." Zara nodded, still struggling to process her surroundings. Earlier this evening, she had been applying concealer in a restaurant bathroom, preparing for another night of pretending. Now she was standing in a luxury apartment offered by a man who was essentially a stranger because he had seen what no one else had bothered to see. "Mr. Valenti," she started. Dante. She took a breath. "Thank you. I do not know why you are doing this, but thank you." He studied her for a long moment, his dark eyes unreadable. "I told you why I'm doing this," he said finally. "But if you want another reason, here it is. I have spent my life accumulating power, more power than most men dream of, and I have learned that power means nothing if it is not used for something worthwhile. Most of what I do is not particularly admirable. This might be." He walked to the door, then paused with his hand on the frame. "Get some rest, Zara Thompson. Tomorrow will be a long day." Then he was gone, and Zara was alone in an apartment that felt like a dream, wondering if she would wake up any moment and find herself back in the nightmare she had been living. She did not sleep that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Marcus's face, twisted with rage the way it had been so many times before. She saw his fist coming toward her. She felt the impact, the pain, the familiar terror that had become the backdrop of her existence. Around 3 a.m, her phone buzzed. Not the phone Marcus had controlled, which was still at his apartment, but a new phone Dante had given her before he left. Just a simple text from an unknown number. "The security team has reported that Marcus returned to his apartment approximately 90 minutes ago. He appears to have been drinking heavily. You're safe. Sleep well." It was not signed, but she knew who had sent it. Even in the middle of the night, Dante Valenti was watching over her, making sure she knew she was protected. The gesture made her eyes water with tears that had nothing to do with allergies. She typed back a simple reply. "Thank you." 3 dots appeared, indicating he was typing. Then, "You are welcome. But truly, Zara, try to rest. Tomorrow we begin the process of rebuilding your life. You will need your strength." She set the phone aside and stared at the ceiling, thinking about the strange turns life could take. This morning, she had been carefully covering bruises and rehearsing lies. Tonight, she was lying in a luxury apartment, protected by a man who had seen through every defense she had constructed. What did it say about her life that she felt safer in the care of a reputed Mafia boss than she had ever felt with the man who claimed to love her? Instead of sleeping, she wandered through the apartment, touching things to convince herself they were real. She took a shower in a bathroom that was larger than the bedroom she had shared with Marcus. She wrapped herself in a robe that was softer than anything she had ever owned. She stood at the windows and watched the city lights sparkle far below, and she cried. Not from sadness, not from fear, but from something she had almost forgotten how to feel. Hope. At 7 in the morning, there was a knock on the door. Zara's heart raced as she approached, old habits making her check through the peephole before opening it. But it was not Marcus on the other side. It was Dante Valenti, dressed casually in dark jeans and a white shirt, holding 2 cups of coffee. "I thought you might be awake," he said. "May I come in?" Zara stepped aside to let him enter. He moved through the space with the easy confidence of someone who belonged everywhere he went, setting the coffees on the kitchen counter and pulling out a stool for her. "How are you feeling?" he asked. "I do not know." She accepted the coffee, wrapping her hands around the warm cup. Scared, relieved, confused, everything at once. That is understandable. He took a sip of his own coffee. "I have news. My people have been watching your Marcus since last night." Watching him? Observing. Nothing more. For now. He was at a bar until 2 in the morning, became increasingly agitated when you did not answer his calls or respond to his texts. He went back to his apartment and has been there since. I expect he will begin looking for you in earnest today. Zara felt the familiar fear coil in her stomach. He will be furious. Let him be furious. His fury means nothing within these walls. Dante set down his coffee. "Now, we need to talk about what happens next. I have given you sanctuary, but sanctuary is not a solution. Your Marcus will not simply forget you exist. He will look for you, and eventually, if no action is taken, he might find you. So what do I do? That depends on what you want. Option 1, I can make him disappear." The words were said so casually that Zara almost did not register their meaning. When she did, her breath caught. "You mean kill him?" "I mean ensure he is never a threat to you again." Dante's expression did not change. "I told you last night that I'm not a good man. I have done things that would horrify you. This would be one of those things." Zara's mind reeled. 24 hours ago, she had been a woman trapped in an abusive relationship, invisible to everyone around her. Now a man was offering to commit murder on her behalf, as casually as he might offer to fetch her groceries. "I cannot ask you to do that," she whispered. "You are not asking. I am offering. There is a difference." Dante's dark eyes held hers. "But if violence is not your preferred solution, there are other options. Option 2, I can have my lawyers help you build a case against him. Document the abuse, file for restraining orders, pursue criminal charges. It is slower and less certain, but it is legal. He will find ways around restraining orders. He always said he would. That is possible. But it would be harder with my resources backing you. I have lawyers who specialize in exactly this kind of situation. They know how to build cases, how to close loopholes, how to make certain that men like your Marcus face actual consequences. And option 3? Option 3 is that you do nothing, stay in this apartment indefinitely, hide from him for the rest of your life. Dante's voice hardened slightly. I do not recommend option 3. It is cowardice dressed up as safety, and you have been a coward long enough. The words stung, but Zara recognized the truth in them. She had been a coward. She had stayed when she should have left. She had accepted abuse that no one should accept. She had hidden the evidence and told lies, and enabled Marcus to continue hurting her without consequence. Dante must have seen something change in her expression, because his own face softened. That was harsh, he acknowledged. Forgive me. I have very little patience for situations like this. Not because of any failing in you, but because I have seen too many women destroyed by men who should have been stopped long before the damage became permanent. Was your mother one of them? The question slipped out before Zara could stop it. She expected Dante to shut down, to tell her it was none of her business, but instead he nodded slowly. My father was a violent man. He hurt my mother for years before she found the courage to leave him. By then, the damage was done. She never fully recovered. She died when I was 23, technically from heart failure, but really from a lifetime of fear and pain that had worn her body down to nothing. I am sorry. I did not tell you that story for sympathy. Dante's voice was flat. I told you because I want you to understand why I take this personally. My father never faced consequences for what he did. He died, wealthy and respected, mourned by people who never knew what he was capable of behind closed doors. I have spent my adult life ensuring that I am nothing like him, but I have also ensured that men like him do not escape justice, at least not in my sphere of influence. He looked at her directly. Your Marcus is in my sphere of influence now, whether he knows it or not. What happens to him depends on you. But something will happen. I will not allow him to continue hurting women simply because no one has stopped him yet. Zara was silent for a long time, staring into her coffee, thinking about everything Dante had said, about options and consequences and justice. The legal route, she said finally. I want to do this the right way. I want him to face actual consequences, not just disappear into the night. I want the world to know what he really is. Dante nodded, something like approval flickering in his dark eyes. That is the harder choice, he said, but it is the right one. I will contact my lawyers today. We will begin building a case. In the meantime, you will stay here where you are safe. And what about my job? I cannot just stop working. Why not? Because I have bills, because I need money, because I cannot live off your charity indefinitely. I pay you. Dante's tone suggested this should have been obvious. I pay everyone who works at my restaurant. You will continue to receive your salary, regardless of whether you are physically present. Consider it paid leave. That is not how employment works. It is how employment works when I own the company. He stood, straightening his shirt. I will have my assistant bring you some things today. Clothes, toiletries, whatever you need to be comfortable. This apartment is yours for as long as you need it. Dante waited. Thank you, Zara said, and meant it more than she had ever meant anything in her life. Do not thank me yet. He walked to the door, then turned back to look at her. We have not even begun. Your Marcus is going to fight back. He is going to try everything in his power to get to you, and when he realizes he cannot reach you, he is going to become desperate. Desperate men are dangerous. More dangerous than you? The smile that crossed Dante's face was cold and sharp. Nothing is more dangerous than me, he said. That is why you're going to be fine. Then he left, and Zara sat alone with her coffee, her racing heart, and the strange sensation that for the first time in over a year, she was exactly where she was supposed to be. The days that followed were a blur of activity. Dante's lawyers arrived the next morning, a team of 4 women and 2 men who treated Zara with a kindness and professionalism that made her want to cry. They photographed her current bruises. They documented the older injuries that had not yet fully healed. They took detailed statements about every incident of violence she could remember, creating a timeline of abuse that stretched back 8 months. They filed for an emergency restraining order. They contacted the police to report Marcus's crimes. They reached out to his employer with carefully worded letters about their employees' documented pattern of domestic violence. Marcus fought back, of course. He hired his own lawyers who claimed Zara was lying, that she had fabricated everything for attention, that she was trying to destroy a good man's reputation for reasons unknown. He denied ever laying a hand on her. He produced character witnesses who swore he was the kindest, gentlest person they had ever met. The day Marcus's lawyers filed their first counter-motion, Dante appeared at Zara's apartment unannounced. His expression was carefully controlled, but she had learned to read the subtle signs of his mood. Something was wrong. Your Marcus has hired the firm of Whitaker and Associates, he said without preamble. They are expensive and ruthless. They specialize in defending wealthy clients against accusations they prefer to make disappear. Does that change things? It changes the timeline. Dante sat down on the couch, his long legs stretched out in front of him. They will try to discredit you. They will dig into your past, looking for anything they can use. They will paint you as unstable, as vindictive, as a woman scorned who invented a story to destroy an innocent man. Zara felt the familiar fear creeping back, the fear she had lived with for so long, the fear Marcus had carefully cultivated until it was as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. Maybe this was a mistake, she whispered. Maybe I should have just disappeared, started over somewhere else, let him think he won. Dante's eyes flashed with something dangerous. That is exactly what he wants you to think, he said. That is exactly what men like him count on. They know that the legal system is exhausting and expensive and humiliating. They know that most victims would rather disappear than face the scrutiny. They use that knowledge as a weapon. He leaned forward, his intense gaze holding hers. But you are not most victims, Zara. You have resources that most victims do not have. You have lawyers who are better than his. You have protection that his money cannot buy. And you have something else. What? You have me? Dante's voice was quiet but absolute. And I do not lose. The weeks that followed were brutal. Marcus's lawyers did exactly what Dante had predicted. They subpoenaed Zara's medical records, her employment history, her social media posts going back years. They interviewed her former coworkers, her neighbors, anyone who might have information they could twist into evidence of her unreliability. They found a therapist she'd seen briefly in college after her father left, and tried to use those sessions to suggest she had a history of mental instability. They found an ex-boyfriend who was willing to say she had been clingy and possessive. They found a supervisor from a job she had quit 3 years ago who remembered her as emotional and difficult. None of it was true in the way they presented it, but that did not matter. What mattered was creating doubt, establishing a narrative in which Zara was not a victim but a villain. Through it all, Dante's team countered every move. They produced their own witnesses, their own evidence, their own narrative. They painted Marcus as a serial abuser with a documented pattern of violence against women. They found emergency room records from his previous girlfriend, who had been treated for a broken wrist and bruised ribs, but had never pressed charges. They found a college girlfriend who had filed a police report about stalking behavior that had been dismissed when Marcus's father made a donation to the university. The battle was exhausting, but Dante's team was better. They found other women Marcus had dated, women who had similar stories of charm that turned to cruelty, of fists that followed declarations of love. They uncovered medical records, police reports that had been filed but never pursued, a pattern of behavior that stretched back years. The restraining order was granted. Marcus was fired from his job. Criminal charges were filed. Through it all, Zara stayed in Dante's guest apartment, watching her old life crumble from a distance. She did not miss it. She did not miss the fear or the walking on eggshells or the constant anticipation of violence, but she grieved for the version of herself that had believed Marcus loved her, the naive young woman who had thought she had found something real. 2 months into the legal battle, Marcus made his move. Zara was alone in the apartment on a Tuesday afternoon, reading through documents her lawyers had sent, when the concierge called up to say she had a visitor. A delivery person, he said, with flowers that needed to be signed for personally. Something in his voice made her hesitate. The concierge she had come to know over the past weeks was a man named Gerald, who had a warm voice and always asked about her day. This voice was different, flatter, nervous. "Who is the delivery from?" she asked. The man on the other end of the line paused too long before answering. "A local florist, ma'am. They insist on a personal signature." Fear shot through her like electricity. She hung up the phone and immediately dialed Dante's number. He answered on the first ring. "Zara?" "Something is wrong," she said, her voice trembling despite her efforts to stay calm. Someone called from the front desk about a delivery, but it did not sound like Gerald, and the person was asking me to come down personally. "Lock the door. Do not open it for anyone. I am on my way." The line went dead, and Zara rushed to the front door, engaging every lock, including a deadbolt she had not noticed before. Her heart was pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears, and her hands were shaking the way they used to shake when Marcus was in one of his moods. 20 minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Zara froze, every muscle in her body tensing for flight. "It is me," Dante's voice called through the wood. "Zara, open the door." She looked through the peephole to confirm, then undid the locks with trembling fingers. Dante stepped inside, followed by 2 of his security men, and immediately pulled her into his arms. "You are safe," he murmured against her hair. "It was handled." "What happened?" "Your Marcus hired someone to get past building security." The man at the front desk was not Gerald. He was an imposter who had convinced the real Gerald he was a temporary replacement from the security company. Dante's voice was hard with controlled anger. "He was supposed to get you to come downstairs, where Marcus was waiting in a car outside." Zara's blood ran cold. "He was here? He was actually here? He is gone now. My men convinced him that approaching this building again would be a very poor decision." Dante pulled back to look at her face. "He will not try this again, Zara. I promise you that." "How can you be sure?" "Because the next time he comes within 100 feet of this building, he will discover exactly what happens to men who threaten people under my protection." Dante's dark eyes were flat and dangerous. "He has been warned. If he ignores that warning, the consequences will be on his own head." The incident shook Zara badly. For days afterward, she jumped at every sound, flinched at every knock, struggled to trust that the security measures Dante had put in place were actually keeping her safe. The progress she had made over the past months seemed to evaporate, replaced by the old fear, the old hypervigilance, the old certainty that Marcus would find a way to get to her. Dante noticed, of course. He always noticed. "You are not eating?" he said one evening, sitting across from her at the kitchen counter with a meal she had barely touched. "You are not sleeping? You are retreating into yourself. I am fine. You are lying." His voice was gentle but firm. "Talk to me, Zara. Tell me what you're thinking." The dam broke. All the fear and anxiety she had been holding back came pouring out, words tumbling over each other as she tried to explain the terror that had taken root in her mind. The certainty that Marcus would never stop. The conviction that no matter how many lawyers she hired or how much security surrounded her, he would find a way to reach her. The thought that kept her up at night, the whisper that said maybe it would have been easier to just stay with him, to accept the abuse as the price of survival. Dante listened without interrupting. When she finally ran out of words, he was quiet for a long moment. "Do you know what I admire most about you?" he asked finally. Zara shook her head, too drained to speak. "Your resilience. You have been through things that would destroy most people, and you are still here, still fighting, still refusing to give up." He reached across the counter and took her hand. "The fear you are feeling is normal. It is the natural response to trauma, but it is not the truth of who you are. The truth is that you are stronger than you know, braver than you believe, and more capable than you give yourself credit for. I do not feel strong. Strength is not the absence of fear. Strength is continuing forward despite the fear." Dante squeezed her hand. "And that is exactly what you are doing. Every day you wake up and face the world, every day you work with the lawyers and push through the legal process, every day you refuse to let him win, you are being strong, even when it does not feel like it." His words settled something inside her, not a cure, not a magic solution to the trauma she had experienced, but a reminder that she was not alone in this, that she had support, that the fear was real, but it was not the whole truth. The weeks after that conversation were better, not perfect, but better. Zara started seeing a therapist Dante recommended, a woman who specialized in trauma and domestic violence, who helped her process the years of abuse in healthy ways. She started eating again, sleeping again, finding moments of joy in the small things she had forgotten how to appreciate, and she started falling in love with the man who had saved her. Dante visited often. Not every day, but several times a week, always with coffee, always with updates on the case, always with that intense, focused attention that made her feel like she was the only person in the world who mattered. They talked about more than Marcus. They talked about her childhood, growing up in Brooklyn with a mother who worked 2 jobs and a father who left when she was 8. They talked about her dreams, the career in interior design she had abandoned when Marcus convinced her she was not talented enough. They talked about the future, what she wanted to do when this was all over, who she wanted to become. And they talked about him, about his family, the empire he had inherited and expanded, the moral complexities of running businesses that operated outside the law. He was honest with her in a way she had not expected, admitting to things that should have made her afraid but somehow did not. He had done terrible things, she knew. He was capable of violence that made Marcus look like an amateur, but he had never raised a hand to a woman. He had never used his power to hurt people who were weaker than him. He had a code, twisted as it might be, and that code included protecting people like her. Somewhere along the way, without her noticing, Zara's feelings began to change. She found herself looking forward to his visits, not just for the comfort of his protection, but for the man himself, for his dry humor and his sharp intelligence, for the way he looked at her like she was remarkable, for the careful gentleness he showed despite being capable of such brutality. She found herself thinking about him when he was not there, wondering what he was doing, who he was with, whether he thought about her the way she thought about him. She found herself falling in love with him, which was terrifying and exhilarating and completely unexpected. One evening, 3 months after their first meeting, Dante came to her apartment with Chinese food and a bottle of wine. They ate on the couch, the city glittering outside the windows, and talked about nothing in particular. "The trial starts next week," Dante said. "Marcus's criminal trial. The prosecutor is confident of a conviction." "Good." Zara set down her wine glass. "He deserves to go to prison. He deserves worse than prison." Dante's voice was neutral. "But prison will have to do, thank you. For everything. For believing me when no one else did. For giving me a place to hide. For all of it. You have thanked me at least 100 times, Zara. It is not necessary. It is necessary to me. They fell into a comfortable silence. Zara was acutely aware of how close they were sitting, of the warmth radiating from his body, of the way her heart was beating faster than it should. Dante, she said quietly, can I ask you something? Anything. Why are you still here? He turned to look at her, his dark eyes questioning. Why do you still visit? She clarified. The case is almost over. I do not need protection anymore. Not really. But you keep coming. Why? Dante was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was careful, measured. In the beginning, he said, I helped you because it was the right thing to do, because I saw something in you that reminded me of my mother, and I could not walk away. But now... He trailed off, and Zara saw something she had never seen before in his composed expression. Uncertainty. Now I come because I want to, he admitted, because being with you has become the best part of my day, because I have spent my entire adult life building walls around myself, and somehow you have gotten through them without even trying. He reached out and took her hand, his touch gentle. I am falling in love with you, Zara Thompson. I know that is complicated, given everything that has happened. I know you have been through trauma and are still healing. I know I am probably the last person on earth you should be involved with, but I needed you to know the truth, even if nothing ever comes of it. Zara felt tears prick at her eyes again, but these were different from the tears she had cried so many times before. These were not tears of pain or fear or desperation. These were tears of joy. I am falling in love with you too, she whispered. I think I have been for a while. Dante closed his eyes briefly, like a man who had been bracing for a blow and received a blessing instead. You should not, he said. I am a dangerous man, Zara. I have done things that would make you hate me if you knew the details. I can give you safety and protection, but I cannot give you a normal life. I do not want a normal life. I want you. He opened his eyes and looked at her, and for once there was no calculation in his gaze, no assessment or evaluation, just raw, unguarded emotion. You are sure? I am sure. He kissed her then, slow and careful, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she did not want. She leaned into the kiss, into him, into this impossible thing that had grown between them in the wreckage of her old life. When they finally broke apart, Dante rested his forehead against hers. This changes things, he said quietly. If we are together, truly together, then you become a target. My enemies will see you as a way to hurt me. My world is not kind to the people I care about. I know. And you are still willing? I spent 14 months being afraid. Zara reached up to touch his face. I am done being afraid. If loving you means danger, then I will learn to live with danger. But I will not walk away from the first person who has ever made me feel like I matter. You matter, Dante said fiercely. You matter more than I know how to express. Then show me. He kissed her again, deeper this time, and Zara felt something inside her heel that she had not known was broken. They made their way to the bedroom, and he made love to her with a tenderness that made her cry, with a passion that made her forget everything except the feeling of his hands on her skin, his body against hers, his voice in her ear telling her she was beautiful, she was safe, she was his. He was careful with her, so careful. Every touch was a question, every movement an invitation rather than a demand. He paid attention to the way she responded, adjusted when she tensed, stopped when she needed to breathe. It was nothing like what she had known before, nothing like the mechanical, often painful encounters with Marcus that had left her feeling used and empty. This was different. This was worship. You are beautiful, Dante murmured against her skin, his lips tracing a path down her neck. So beautiful. I have thought about this since the moment I saw you. I was a mess when you met me, Zara whispered back, her fingers tangled in his dark hair. Swollen eyes and smeared makeup and fear in every line of my body, and still the most beautiful woman I had ever seen. He lifted his head to meet her eyes, not despite those things, because of them, because I saw your strength underneath the fear, because I saw the fighter hiding behind the mask, because I knew, even then, that you were remarkable. She pulled him down for another kiss, losing herself in the sensation, in the safety, in the overwhelming relief of being touched by someone who would never hurt her. When they finally lay still, tangled together in the sheets, Zara traced patterns on Dante's chest with her fingertips. His skin was warm and smooth, interrupted here and there by scars that spoke of a violent past. She did not ask about them. She did not need to. Everyone had their wounds, visible and invisible. "Can I tell you something?" she asked softly. "Anything. I used to think I would never be able to be intimate with anyone again. After everything with Marcus, the idea of being touched, being vulnerable, letting someone close to me like that, it felt impossible." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But with you, it feels natural. Safe. Like I was always meant to end up here." Dante's arm tightened around her. "You were always meant to end up here," he said quietly. "I believe that. I am not a religious man, Zara. I do not believe in fate or destiny or any of that romantic nonsense. But I believe in this. In us. In whatever force put you in my path that night. Even though I was broken, you were never broken. Just hurt. There is a difference." He kissed the top of her head, and Zara felt tears prick at her eyes for the 100th time since meeting him. But these were different tears. Happy tears. Tears of relief and gratitude and overwhelming love. Afterward, wrapped in his arms, Zara listened to his heartbeat and thought about how strange life was. A few months ago, she had been ready to give up, had considered ending everything just to escape the pain. Now she was lying in the arms of a man who would burn the world down to protect her, who had seen through her lies with a single glance, who had offered her salvation without asking for anything in return. "Thank you," she whispered against his chest. "For what?" "For seeing me. Everyone else looked at me and saw what I wanted them to see, but you saw the truth, from the very first moment." Dante's arms tightened around her. "I will always see you, Zara, all of you, the broken parts and the healing parts and the strong parts that are starting to emerge. And I will spend the rest of my life making sure you never have to hide again." She fell asleep in his arms, safe and warm and loved, and for the first time in over a year, she did not have nightmares. Marcus Patterson was convicted of assault and battery 6 months later. He was sentenced to 5 years in prison, which was longer than expected thanks to the additional testimony Dante's lawyers had uncovered from his previous victims. The day of the verdict, Zara sat in the gallery of the courtroom, her hand clasped tightly in Dante's. She had not wanted him there initially, worried about what it would look like, what questions it might raise. But he had insisted, and she had been too grateful for the support to argue. The prosecution had presented a devastating case. Photographs of Zara's injuries documented meticulously by Dante's medical team. Testimony from 3 other women Marcus had abused, women who had been too afraid to come forward until they learned they were not alone. Expert witnesses who explained the psychology of domestic abuse, the cycle of violence and apology that kept victims trapped. Marcus's lawyers had done their best. They had attacked the credibility of every witness, questioned every piece of evidence, painted Marcus as a misunderstood man being victimized by vindictive women. But the evidence was too overwhelming, the pattern too clear. When the foreman read the verdict, guilty on all counts, Zara felt something inside her release. A knot she had been carrying for so long, she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. Marcus's face went white. He turned to look at her, and for a moment she saw the rage that had terrorized her for months. The pure, undiluted fury of a man who had lost control, who was facing consequences for the first time in his life. Then his lawyers led him away, and she never saw him again. Outside the courthouse, surrounded by reporters and cameras, Zara gave a brief statement that her lawyers had helped her prepare. She thanked the prosecution, the witnesses who had come forward, the legal system for taking domestic violence seriously. She did not mention Dante by name, though he stood just behind her, a steady presence at her back. When the cameras turned away, he leaned close to her ear. "You did it," he said quietly. "You survived him. You beat him. You won." "We won," she corrected. "I could not have done this without you." "Yes, you could have." He pulled back to look at her. "You are stronger than you know, Zara Thompson. I just gave you resources. The courage, the resilience, the determination to see this through. That was all you." She wanted to argue, to insist that she would never have made it without him, but something in his expression stopped her. He needed her to believe in her own strength. He needed her to know that she was not just a woman who had been rescued, but a woman who had fought and won. So she nodded, and smiled, and let him lead her away from the courthouse, into a future that finally felt possible. Zara watched from the gallery as the verdict was read, as Marcus's face went white with shock, as he was led away in handcuffs. She did not feel triumphant. She did not feel vindicated. She just felt done. That chapter of her life was over. A new one was beginning. She moved out of the guest apartment and into Dante's penthouse, officially becoming a part of his life rather than just a person he was protecting. She went back to work at Bellissimo, not as a hostess but as a consultant using her eye for design to help renovate the restaurant. She met Dante's family, his sister Valentina and his cousin Marco, and the sprawling network of aunts and uncles and cousins who made up the Valenti clan. They welcomed her with warmth and curiosity, clearly delighted that Dante had finally found someone who could break through his walls. She became familiar with the complexities of his world, the shadowy business dealings and the dangerous enemies, and the constant awareness that violence lurked beneath the surface of his carefully cultivated respectability. She did not love that part of him, could not love that part of him, but she accepted it as part of the package. There were adjustments to be made, of course. Living with a man who had enemies meant learning to accept security measures that would have seemed absurd in her old life. There were bodyguards who followed at a discreet distance when she went out. There were protocols for travel, for communication, for emergencies. There was the constant awareness that Dante's world contained dangers that ordinary people never had to consider, but there were also benefits she had not expected. The resources to pursue her dreams of interior design, the connections that opened doors previously closed to her, the freedom that came from never having to worry about money again. And more than that, there was the community Dante's family provided. Sunday dinners at his mother's house, where Zara learned to make pasta from scratch and was interrogated lovingly by aunts who wanted to know every detail of her life. Holiday celebrations filled with cousins and children and the kind of warm chaos she had always envied but never experienced. She belonged somewhere. For the first time in her adult life, she truly belonged. And she loved him. God, how she loved him. With an intensity that sometimes frightened her, with a depth that she had not known she was capable of. He had saved her life in every way that mattered, and she would spend the rest of hers making sure he knew how grateful she was. 1 year after that first night in the restaurant, Dante took her back to Bellissimo. Back to the same table where he had demanded she sit with him and tell him who had hurt her. "Do you remember what you said to me that night?" he asked. "I said a lot of things that night. I mostly cried. You said you would come with me for one espresso." His dark eyes sparkled with amusement. "And then you had to get back to work. And instead I ended up falling in love with you. Instead you ended up falling in love with me." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "Which is why I want to ask you something." Zara's heart stopped. Dante opened the box to reveal a ring, a simple band of white gold with a single brilliant diamond that caught the candlelight like captured fire. "I know it has only been a year," he said. "I know you have been through things that most people cannot imagine. I know my life is complicated and dangerous and not at all what you probably dreamed of. But I love you, Zara Thompson. I love your strength and your kindness and the way you refuse to let your past define your future. I love the way you make me want to be better than I am." Tears were streaming down her face, but she was smiling. "Will you marry me?" Dante asked. "Will you be mine? Officially? Permanently? Forever?" "Yes," she said, and the word came out choked with emotion, but absolutely certain. "Yes, I will marry you." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly, like it had been made for her. Then he kissed her, right there in the middle of the restaurant, in front of the other diners and the staff and anyone else who happened to be watching. "I love you," he said against her lips. "I love you too," she replied. "Thank you for seeing me that night. Thank you for not looking away like everyone else." "I will never look away from you," Dante promised. "Never." And as they sat together at that table, the table where everything had begun, Zara thought about how much her life had changed. A year ago, she had been invisible, broken, ready to give up. Now she was engaged to the most powerful man she had ever met, a man who loved her fiercely and protected her absolutely and saw her completely. All because he had looked at her swollen eyes and known they were not allergies. All because he had refused to accept the lie everyone else had been willing to believe. 3 years later, Zara stood on the balcony of the apartment she now shared with her husband, watching the sunset over Manhattan. The city glittered like a jewel, lights beginning to sparkle as evening descended, and she thought about how different her life had become. She was no longer the frightened woman who had hidden bruises beneath makeup and rehearsed lies in bathroom mirrors. She was Zara Valenti now, wife of Dante Valenti, mother to their 18-month-old daughter Sophia. She had started her own interior design firm, using the talent Marcus had told her she did not have to build something beautiful and successful. The nightmares had mostly stopped. The flinching when men moved too quickly had faded. The hypervigilance that had defined her existence for so long had gradually relaxed into the normal awareness of a woman who had learned to protect herself. She was healed. Not perfectly, not completely, because trauma leaves scars that never fully disappear. But enough. Enough to love again. Enough to trust again. Enough to believe in a future that had once seemed impossible. Arms wrapped around her from behind, and she leaned back into Dante's familiar embrace. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, his lips brushing her ear. "Everything. Nothing. How lucky I am." "You are not lucky. You are strong." He turned her to face him. "Everything you have now, you earned." "I did not rescue you, Zara. I gave you a safe place to rescue yourself." It was something he had said many times over the years, his insistence that her survival was her own achievement. She had stopped arguing with him about it, had learned to accept the truth in his words even when they felt too generous. "I love you," she said instead. "I love you too, more than I thought I was capable of loving anyone." He kissed her softly. "Now come inside. Our daughter is asking for her mama, and I have been informed that bedtime stories are not the same when Papa tells them." Zara laughed and let him lead her inside, into the warmth and light of the home they had built together. Sophia was waiting in her nursery, her dark curls wild around her face, her eyes the same espresso brown as her father's. She reached for Zara with chubby arms, and Zara scooped her up, breathing in the sweet baby smell of her hair. "Story, Mama," Sophia demanded in her imperious toddler voice. "Want story." "What kind of story?" "Princess story." "With dragons." Zara settled into the rocking chair by Sophia's crib, her daughter curled against her chest, and began to spin a tale about a princess who had been trapped in a tower by a terrible dragon. But this princess did not wait to be rescued. She was clever and brave, and she found her own way out, climbing down the tower wall, stone by stone. And when she reached the bottom, she discovered a knight who had been waiting for her, not to save her, but to stand beside her as she saved herself. Together they defeated the dragon, Zara said, her voice soft. Together they built a kingdom where no one was afraid anymore, and they lived happily ever after. Sophia was already asleep, her breathing slow and even, her tiny fingers curled around a lock of Zara's hair. Zara sat for a long moment watching her daughter sleep, thinking about the story she'd told and the story she had lived. Dante appeared in the doorway, a soft smile on his face. "Good story," he said quietly. "It is my favorite one." "Mine, too." Zara laid Sophia gently in her crib, covered her with a soft blanket, and went to her husband. He wrapped his arms around her, and she rested her head against his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. "Thank you," she whispered, "for everything." "You never need to thank me," he replied. "You are my heart, Zara. Protecting you is protecting myself." They stood there for a long moment, wrapped in each other, watching their daughter sleep. Outside the windows, the city sparkled with a million lights, and somewhere out there, the restaurant where they had met was serving dinner to customers who would never know that it was the site of a miracle. Sometimes salvation comes from the most unexpected places. Sometimes the person who saves you is the last person you would have chosen. Sometimes love grows in the darkest soil, in the wreckage of trauma and pain, and becomes something beautiful despite everything that tried to destroy it. Zara did not know what the future held. She did not know what challenges awaited them, what enemies Dante had yet to face, what complications would arise from loving a man who lived in shadows. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was not afraid anymore, and she never would be again. If you love Zara and Dante's story of courage, healing, and finding love in the most unexpected places, make sure to subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another story. Drop a comment below and tell me your favorite moment. Was it when Dante first saw through her lies, the moment she decided to trust him, or their beautiful proposal? If dangerous love stories hook you, share this video with a friend who needs to believe that happy endings are possible. Until next time, remember that sometimes the person who sees your truth is the one who will fight to protect it. Ciao, Bella.